So there were two workmen, and they were up repairing a big hole in the roof of a Roman Catholic church. And they happened to look down through the hole, and they saw this little Italian lady dressed all in black in the second pew, and she was just lost in prayer. And one of the workmen says to the other workman, "Let's have some fun with that lady down there." And so he sticks his head through the hole in the roof and he says, "This is Jesus." She doesn't flinch, doesn't move a muscle, just continues on with her prayer. He sticks his head back down through the hole again and goes, "Lady, this is Jesus." She doesn't flinch again. She doesn't move a muscle, nothing, just continues on with her prayer. He sticks his head down through the hole a third time and he says, "Little Italian lady in the second row, this is Jesus." She looks up and she says, "Be quiet, I'm talking to your mama." One of the things I love about the Bible is it doesn't sugarcoat any of the family dysfunction. It just puts it all out there for the whole world to see. You know, in today's Old Testament reading, we have here about Abraham. Now, Abraham had a really dysfunctional family, right? I mean, he had a child with his wife's serving girl. And then his wife got jealous later on and kicked them both out of the camp. And Ishmael became the founder of the Islamic faith. David, King David. I mean, if you were a therapist and you wanted to get a PhD, you could write a whole thesis on the dysfunction in David's family. My favorite, and even in Jesus' family, there's family dysfunction. My favorite one is the wedding in Cana, right? Jesus and his mother at the wedding in Cana, and his mother comes up to him, and Mary says to Jesus, she says, "The wine has run out." And Jesus says, "Hey, not my circus, not my monkeys, not my problem." And she says, "Can't you do something?" And he says, "My time has not yet come." And she turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." I mean, she doesn't take no for an answer. Mary blows off the Savior of the world, right? I mean, I love that. I absolutely love that. So today, too, we have a bit of family dysfunction. We have two sisters, Mary and Martha, and they're friends of Jesus. They live in a little town, Bethany. It's about 2 miles from Jerusalem. And Jesus happens to be in town, and so Martha invites him over for dinner. And Jesus is in the living room, and he's talking to all the people gathered, and he's preaching and explaining the gospel, or explaining the Torah. And Mary is just sitting at his feet in rapt attention. Meanwhile, out in the kitchen, here's Martha, and she's just slaving away. And you can almost hear the running monologue she's got going, right? I like Jesus, but why does he have to drag those 12 other guys along with him? And they always want something, "Martha, can I have a little more wine? Martha, can I have a little more water? Martha, could you refresh this?" I don't know how I do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Should I put some more logs under the lamb stew, or is it going to burn? I've got so much to do. How can I possibly accomplish this? And meanwhile, my sister's in the other room, and she's not lifting a finger to help me. And you can just see the anger growing and growing and growing. There's a Yiddish word for what Martha's doing. It's called kvetching. And kvetching is basically when you elevate complaining to an art form, okay? And finally, Martha's anger just bursts forth. And she goes into the living room, and rather than say to her sister, "Hey, Mary, I could use a hand out here in the kitchen," she goes to Jesus instead. I mean, there's the dysfunction, right? She triangulates the whole situation. She says to Jesus, "Tell my no good sister to get out in the kitchen and help me." And Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, settle down, calm down. Mary has chosen the better part, and it won't be taken away from her." Do you think Jesus is a little hard on poor Martha? I mean, I do. I mean, the world runs on Marthas, right? You know, when we think of the civil rights movement, we think of the lofty rhetoric of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. But when we really think of the civil rights movement, we also think that without all those women in the church basement cooking meals for all the demonstrators and all the people gathered to hear him speak, without people to pack lunches for the protest march the next day, without people to ferry the volunteers here and back, there would be no civil rights movement. And how about the church? The church runs on Marthas, right? I mean, the altar flowers don't arrange themselves and jump on the altar. The elements don't get up there by themselves. The wonderful music you hear is not just because people kind of showed up and did it. It's because the choir, Eric and the choir, arrived at 9 o'clock. And they rehearsed for an hour. Your readers work hard to get the lessons down so that when they get up there and read, it sounds really good. By the way, your readers do an outstanding job. They really do. I've been tremendously impressed with the quality of reading you have here. Church, and the Sunday school doesn't teach itself. Martha, it's Martha that does all those things. The church runs on Martha. So why is Jesus so hard on poor Martha? And I think there's two reasons for it. One is in the first century Judaism, there's an undercurrent of misogyny, right? Women aren't capable of understanding Torah. They're not incapable of understanding the law or studying the law. And Jesus and I think that undercurrent runs through Jesus' disciples too. I suspect that that's one of the undercurrents that runs through the disciples. And Jesus wants to make clear that women have an equal right to study Torah. Women are equal to men. And so he says, Mary has chosen the better part. Mary has chosen the better part. And the second part of it is that Martha is distracted and anxious. There's no joy. There's no pleasure. There's just stress. And isn't Martha some ways the epitome of modern American society? The hallmarks of which are activity and anxiety? You know, last week we heard the story of the Good Samaritan. And somebody did an experiment. And what they did is they had seminary students write a sermon based on the Good Samaritan. And then they had them report to an office on campus, one by one. And as soon as they got to the office, the person in the office told them, "Oh, you're preaching at the chapel all the way across campus, and you got to be there in 5 minutes, right?" Now, on the way, they had some guy planted who's lying down, obviously in distress. And true to form, any number of the seminarians just walked right on by the guy in distress. And people use that as an example of seminarians are no more caring than anybody else, which may be true, but I don't think that experiment proves that. I think what that experiment says is that when you're in a hurry, when you're stressed, one of the first things to go is compassion. One of the first things to go is compassion. You know, there's the story about the European manager sends an email to his team and he says, "I'm going for a 6-week hiking and backpacking trip in the Alps. I'll be home on September 14th. I'll be back in the office on September 15th. You can get a hold of me then." The American manager sends a text to his team, and he says, "I'm having kidney surgery. I'm going to have a new kidney on Tuesday. Now, I won't go under the anesthesia till about 10, so you can reach me by text up until then. And then I should be in recovery about 12:30, so just call me then if you need some help. Now, there's a great deal of truth in that, actually. When I was in San Jose, I worked with somebody that worked for Philips. Philips is a Dutch company. They make TV sets and electronic stuff. And he and I used to play tennis on the weekends. And one weekend, he seemed kind of not himself. And I said, Hans, I said, what's wrong? What's going on with you? And he said, I got a terrible problem at work. He said, but it's the weekend. He said, none of those guys in Europe are going to pick up the phone. You know, they don't pick up the phone in Europe. They're off. A recent Gallup survey revealed that the average work week for United States full-time employees consists of 47 hours. That almost adds up to an extra full day of work every week. 11% of those surveyed worked 41 to 49 hours. 21% put in 50 to 59 hours. And a whole 18% worked 60 hours or more per week. That means that almost 50% of full-time workers log more than 40 hours every week. On the average, Americans work 137 more hours every year than Japanese workers, who we perceive as chronically overworked, 260 more hours than British workers, 394 hours more than the average uber-efficient German worker, and a whole 499 more hours per year than workers in France. 12 weeks more work than the workers in France. You know, one of the reasons Kellogg cereal, the workers at Kellogg cereal went on strike recently, is that they were working 16 hours a day, 100 days straight, no days off, no days off. Rates of depression and anxiety in the United States are substantially higher than they were in the 1980s, according to a 2014 survey. We are a people that are working ourselves to death. We are Martha. We are worried, we are anxious, we are stressed. And so what do we do about it? What do we do about it? You know, if you read the Gospels, you'll find a lot of little one-liners in there. Jesus went off by himself to a quiet place to pray. Or Jesus sent the disciples across in the boat while he stayed on the shore. We need to find balance in our lives. We need to find balance between work and leisure. You know, St. Benedict, who founded a monastic order, had his rule divided the day into 4 parts: prayer, study, work, sleep. And if we were to modernize that rule, we could balance that into maybe 5 parts. Prayer, which includes church and charity work. Study, or intellectual challenge. Work, which in Benedict's rule was physical labor. And so if you do a job that requires you to use your brain, you need to find an activity to give you some physical exercise, recreation, play, whatever. And the same thing, if your work requires physical effort, then you need to find something intellectual to do to challenge your brain. Family, and sleep. Sleep is vitally important. And so I'd like to invite you to join Mary, to sit at the feet of Jesus, and to hear his words. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy My burden is light. Amen.